Whether we like them or not, the NBA does indeed have rules, and these rules are there to keep the players safe and the integrity of the game intact. The game, to its credit, has evolved greatly over the years to help keep players from crossing lines, but inevitably that goes awry and players go and do things that they should never have done. When that happens, they get suspended. But have you ever wondered what were some of the longest ever suspensions for players? Allow us to show you some of them. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Number 8. Joakim Noah. Joakim Noah has had a very interesting career in the NBA. He's known for defensive presence, being able to trash talk with the best of them, and help teams win at times. But that doesn't mean everything he's done was smart. Noah was suspended for 20 games in 2017 after he tested positive for the over-the-counter supplement selective androgen receptor modulator LGD4033, which is banned by the league. Basically, it was a performance-enhancing drug that would allow him to perform better without any side effects. Except that it wasn't the case because he got caught. As such, he was suspended. As a result, Noah forfeited $2 to $3 million of his salary that season from the Knicks. Number 7. Jodie Meeks. This story has a little bit of irony to it. In 2018, guard Jodie Meeks was suspended for 25 games after violating the NBA's anti-drug program. Meeks tested positive for banned substances, ipamorelin, and peptide 2. Meeks denied the claim and appealed the punishment. The league stood firm and Meeks served the suspension, which carried over to the 2018-2019 season. He was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks and then was waived. He signed to play for the Toronto Raptors for the rest of the 2018-19 season and was part of their 2019 NBA championship team. So though he did something very wrong, he was eventually part of a championship team. Number 6. Kermit Washington. In the olden days of the NBA, violence against players, meaning fouls and technicals and such, was treated with a much lighter touch, which led to one of the most devastating injuries in the history of sports. It was in 1977 when Kermit Washington punched Rudy Tomjanovich with a punch so brutal it haunts people to this day. Yet he was only suspended for 26 games. As for Rudy T, he missed the rest of the season after suffering a broken nose, broken jaw, and cerebral concussion as a result of the punch. Tomjanovich was even leaking spinal fluid into his mouth. All of that from one punch, and he only lost 26 games of his career. Truly shocking. Number 5. Stephen Jackson. Stephen Jackson was also involved in the infamous event known as the Malice at the Palace, which we'll be talking about more later. Jackson was with the Indiana Pacers during the game and he came to the aid of Ron Artest. His involvement included entering the stands and punching a fan. Not only was Jackson suspended for 30 games without pay, but he was also put on probation for 1 year, fined $250 plus community service, and ordered to attend anger management classes. Which didn't help, because later on he was suspended for other charges due to him going crazy in a strip club, to put it lightly. Number 4. Javarius Crittenton. You're going to see 2 violations on this list for carrying firearms, and this is the first one via Javarius Crittenton. Crittenton was suspended for 38 games and he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor gun possession charges. He was sentenced to 1 year of unsupervised probation and required to do community service. Crittenton was waived by the Wizards and he was never able to play for another NBA team. Which is not too much of a surprise because they take firearms very seriously. Plus, if he was that reckless to bring it in the first place, what else was he capable of? Speaking of that other charge, number 3, Gilbert Arenas. Gilbert Arenas called himself Agent Zero during his career with the Washington Wizards, and indeed, he was a player who had some skills and made the Wizards a threat in the Eastern Conference for a time. But then in 2010, Arenas was suspended for storing an unlicensed but unloaded gun in his locker and drawing it on teammate Javarius Crittenton during an argument regarding gambling debts. The suspension was for the rest of the season, but since Agent Zero had played 32 games already, the suspension lasted 50 games. This was obviously a very careless situation by Arenas and something that could have easily been avoided. But Arenas was never the smartest guy, and even when he came back, his play declined until eventually he was out of the league. That charge and suspension are a very dark mark on his career. Number 2. Latrell Sprewell. Latrell Sprewell was one of the most fierce competitors during his time. He was both a scorer and a defender, which made him a great threat on both sides of the ball. However, in 1997, Sprewell was criticized by head coach PJ Carl Zemo during practice, which the baller didn't take well at all. Luttrell went on a rampage, including choking, threatening, and punching Carl Zemo. He was immediately suspended for 10 games, but 2 days later the team terminated Sprewell's outright and threw in a suspension on top of that to make sure he learned his lesson. Spree made an appeal and the sanction was reduced to 68 games, but the damage was done in many ways. That's not something you come back from easily, and indeed, his play on the court was not the same. Number 1. Ron Artest. It's almost fitting that a man like Ron Artest would be at the top of the suspension list because, in many ways, he's a guy who did a lot of dumb things both on the court and off, including changing his name to Meta World Peace. We're going to leave that one alone. But the reason he's on the list is the infamous Malice at the Palace, which started out as a fight between the players of the Pacers, whom Artest was a part of at the time, and the Detroit Pistons. But when a fan threw a drink at Artest, he went after them, and thus a fight between players and fans occurred, and Artest, honest to goodness, punched a fan. All told, players were suspended for a total of 142 games, but Artest got the worst of it, being suspended for the rest of the season, which including the playoffs means he missed 86 games. The Malice at the Palace is still looked at as one of the worst things to ever happen in the NBA. And so, it's not surprising that the punishment for causing it was so severe. There you go, a look at the various players across many years of the NBA who had the longest suspensions in the game's history. Were you surprised to hear how long some of these suspensions were, and what the causes of them were? Or how about the players that got the suspension? Did any of them surprise you? Which players in the league today do you feel could have the next big suspension? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time on the channel.